This is Module 9, the case study. My name is Jacob Anderson. The case study summary, basically a new assistant principal, Richard Inman, attempting to reach a certain group of troublemaking students, was disappointed to find out that one of his focus students named James was seen in the hallway passing something to another student named David. After directing the students to his office and asking the officer to sit in, it was determined that James forced David to hold his brass knuckles out of fear. James admitted that he was the one in the wrong, but the officer arrested both boys and requested suspension for 45 days to the district's Disciplinary Alternative Education Program, or DAEP, D-A-E-P. David had never been in trouble before, so he took the punishment more harshly, as did his mother. The assistant principal, Richard, did not see the advantage of sending both boys to DAEP, as he knew David was threatened and was told to hold the contraband. Richard filled out the paperwork for James to attend DAEP, but he threw James's intended paper away. A week later, he was given an ultimatum from the director of secondary education to fill out the form or receive an official reprimand on his personal file. What we know from the legality standpoint. Brass knuckles were not allowed in the school. The brass knuckles were found in David's possession. The punishment for having brass knuckles is a felony possession that results in expulsion for 45 days. James admitted to forcing David to hold it. A school officer was present in the admission of guilt, and he was that witness. If a referral is not written for David, Richard will receive one instead. So those are all the legalities. As far as ethics go, David was a first-time offender. David's future and current success is at stake. Those are two things to kind of keep in mind as we make our decision. David was forced into holding the brass knuckles, and Inman, the assistant principal, is in a difficult position, basically choosing between David's future and his own career. So those are all things to keep in mind ethically as we make a decision here. A little synthesis of all of that. Principal Richard Inman must make a decision between a felony expulsion and a threatened well-being of David, who was forced to possess an illegal item, and his career and reputation as an administrator. We'll begin. Synthesizing the facts. The people in this situation that are going to have some type of relation to the situation here were the assistant principal, Richard Inman, James, who was a multiple-time offender of random things in the school, David Ramos, that's the boy that is getting in trouble. That was a first-time offender. He's a standout trombonist, and he's a scholar in a lot of honors courses. David Ramos's mother came into the situation. She was obviously angry with the situation. James's mother, who was unsurprised, and the director of secondary education. The place that it took place was at school. That school, it didn't really say much about where that school was, but it did say it contained students from the south side, which for some reason I just assume is kind of a bad part of town. And then DAEP is a place where they would go, but Inman described it as a hellhole that would shatter David's future. The program, so it's a public junior high school. It was mentioned in the article that there's children from 13 to 15 in that school, so that I would assume is the age range. And then there's about 900 students. Reviewing and prioritizing here. So could the conflict, the situation, or the decision being damaging to the stakeholders or the community? I have the community would lose faith in the school system if the wrong decisions are made. And then another question was asked, what individuals and groups have an important stake in the outcome? Well, Inman obviously has an important stake. He may find it harder to apply for a head principal job in the future if he has a reprimand on his personal file. James was doing well in school, but is now going to be taking blame for an incident. David was an honor student, and obviously he will struggle to get into a more prestigious college with a mark on his record. And then David's family. Assumably, David's family had done their best to raise a bright young boy, and his tarnished future would be heartbreaking for them as well. So we got to keep all those people in mind. Have all of the relevant stakeholders been consulted? That's another thing that I was kind of wondering about. So the incident is important to bring the head principal and the superintendent on board. So those two people, they really hadn't talked about the principal, the superintendent, and even honestly, I didn't even write this, but Maybe even like the school board could have been brought in a little bit sooner. So they have a stake in the case. They both could be liable for a lawsuit if the results turn out to be poorly executed. Could I learn more about the situation? I think so. I think the presence of a lawyer is needed for the case because I would like to know how the situation would be handled outside of the school, and maybe we could relate that to the inside of the school as well. Do I know enough to make a decision? I believe that the proper decision would be a warning for David. He has no prior offenses, and a punishment for James. I do not believe Inman has reason to be punished at all. Number 6. Let me move this a little bit. Okay. Options and possible consequences. Option 1, if there was no action taken, this is what it might look like. So it's setting a precedent on bullying. It's saying that bullying is basically okay. It's setting a precedent for punishments for threatened students. So if you threaten a student, they can still get in trouble. You're setting a bunch of precedents here. David's future is threatened even though he has put in a lot of hard work and was forced and threatened to hold an illegal object. So number 2, I describe this as the perfect outcome. The school system advocates for David, who is simply given a warning on the grounds that he did not report the object immediately. That would be the only reason that I feel like he could get a warning. He should have reported it as soon as it happened, but he didn't. James receives a full punishment after proof of the possession of the knuckles. So I do have a little word in there, proof. There needs to be some proof that that's what actually got passed. So whether that's a video camera or something showing that he did have access to those knuckles and he wasn't just covering for David. Inman is commended on his empathy for his students rather than a reprimand. I would say because of all of the work that he would put into kind of get David back to where he's supposed to be, I think he should be commended for that. And then I would say the school district should implement an anti-bullying agenda just so that situation doesn't happen again. An intermediate strategy or other strategies that I thought about maybe happening would be Inman could take the reprimand to save David's future. I think that one would be honestly maybe realistic in some settings. And then I would say this potentially could be seen as an honorable act by a future employer. If an employer says, well, I see you have this reprimand, he could say, yeah, but it was to save a student. And maybe that would be good. Maybe he could get hired with that, but you never know. The other one, Inman could take a resignation. I don't really know what this would solve. It might be giving in. I'm not really sure. Evaluating your options. So option 1, we said no action taken. I've already gone through that. I wanted to talk about the pros and cons for this section 7. A pro, if there's no action taken, Inman is not reprimanded. He has no reason to be in the first place. So that's a good thing. He's not reprimanded if he does that. He'll just sign the paper and move on. There's 3 cons, though. David's future is jeopardized. School admin are seen as weak and unethical. And then bullies have found a new method to get people in trouble that do not deserve it. Again, we're setting precedents there. Number 2, the perfect outcome. A pro, justice is served. A pro, David's future is saved. A pro, the community sees the principal's effort. Our last pro, Inman is not reprimanded. But one of our cons is that James goes back into DAEP after doing very well to that point. And honestly, he should go back there, in my opinion, but it is still a con that he's still going there. So I'm gonna count that. Last one, our intermediate strategies. For the one where Inman takes the reprimand and saves David's future, one of the cons was that Inman is reprimanded, but he had no reason to be. He may not be able to be employed in the future. Like I said, it might be seen as a plus, though, too, as a pro. David's future is saved would be a pro, and James is still getting punished. That could be seen as a pro as well. The last one, Inman resigns. A pro, Inman seems like he is resigning to fight back on bullying. Maybe that's seen as a good thing if he does resign. A con, a good principal was lost. This guy obviously has some ethical standpoints that are good for a principal or a leader to have. And then another con for that would be maybe a lawsuit to come. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that lawsuits might come from this situation, but that's just one of them. Section 8, choose the best option. I chose, obviously, the one that I said was the perfect fit. I would like to choose the second option stated where David is only given a warning on the grounds that he did not report the object immediately. James receives a full punishment after proof of possession of the knuckles. Inman is commended on his empathy for students. For this to be done, the handbook would have to be changed to reflect the situation. This means that there is quite a bit of work to do in terms of communication. The school board would have to be notified, have a meeting, vote on the new legislature, and the superintendent and the principals in the district would have to adopt the new rules on possession after coercion. I put together a little flow chart here for the implementation process here. First of all, as you can see, the situation arises. I'm over on the left top corner. The situation arises where a student is getting unfairly punished. The vice principal is in charge of that current situation. The vice principal notifies the head principal with his concerns. And then the principal has two choices. They can either agree or disagree. Well, let's start with disagree. If the principal disagrees with the outcome that the vice principal is trying to do, the vice principal could choose to go around the principal and talk to the superintendent. That's probably not recommended to go around your boss, though. But if it's something that's really, really important, it might be worth it. If the principal agrees, though, that's good. The principal can speak to the superintendent. The superintendent can call a school board meeting. The school board can vote on setting precedents on the situation, introducing new legislature in the student handbook. In the meantime, we would hope that David remains uncharged until they either pass or fail that vote. If the vote passes, that's what we're looking for right there. David walks out without charge. I have that one highlighted. That's what I'm trying to do with my implementation of this legislature, I guess. If the vote fails, David is punished, and then that could be other things coming from that, potential lawsuits or whatever. I think they would be liable for a lawsuit. So, all right, next. The standards. I'm not going to read through the full standards. I'm sure everybody that's watching this video has read them. So the current and future success and well-being of each student was one piece that I picked out of there. The vice principal was looking out for David's future, so that's obviously looking for his well-being. Advocating for ethical decisions. So our plan is to go to the head principal and the superintendent for support. So we're advocating by doing that. Evaluating, communicating about, and advocating, evaluating, communicating, and advocating. We dove into the potential outcomes for each situation. We had all of our outcomes, and then we listed our pros and cons. Modeling ethical behavior, I would say the principal stood by his moral compass when tearing up that form for David. And then we're going to cultivate. So we're going to attempt to fix the situation for David by attempting to fix the situation for David. You are cultivating ethical behavior to all of the people that are watching the situation. These are my references and my reflection. So nearly every decision that you make in your life affects somebody other than yourself. So when it comes to your ethical decisions, having a moral compass can solidify your choices, which limits regret and provides you with reasoning behind your actions. In the real world, your moral compass may have to be reset to reflect new circumstances that have not yet arrived. Therefore, you must reflect before taking action and do what is best for most people. In this assignment, the vice principal debated on his own termination in order to save somebody who felt was not in the wrong. With this type of selflessness, as a leader, businesses and schools are bound to succeed. Thank you very much.